welcome to Historically Speaking. I'm your host, Susan Alatalo, and it gives me great pleasure to have today three guests who either have been on the board or been involved with the Marlborough Historical Society and now serve in other capacities, two of them. We're going to be talking today a little bit about the different organizations that are in Marlborough for people who want to learn more about local history and how it can be intertwined with their own lives. So Frank Valiente is past president of Marlborough Historical Society. He's a long-time resident of Marlborough. Richard Wilcox is the curator of the Marlborough Historical Society, and he's also active in the Old House Association. He is a member of the Marlborough Historic Commission. And our vice chair of Marlborough Historic Commission is Lynn Faust, who has also been a trustee on the Marlborough Historical Society. And she is chairing the local preservation project.
Currently we have a National Register project going on through actually yet another organization called Historic Marlborough, where we'll be putting two more historic districts on the National Register probably this fall. That's one of the most exciting projects we've been doing over the last few months.
Maybe you can explain what an historic district is. I know there was a meeting, an open hearing recently.
Well, there are a number of different kinds of historic districts, and actually Marlborough is very lucky to have some great neighborhoods that are really in themselves historic districts. Back in the early 90s, we did a comprehensive survey that showed that we have potential for a number of National Register historic districts in Marlborough. 2 years ago, we registered downtown Marlborough Center on the National Register. And our current project, where we'll be registering West Main Street in the Pleasant Street area, was done at the request of the neighborhood associations. And we'll be registering quite a few buildings in those two districts. The National Register is a very honorary designation where a set of properties are basically put on a national register and listed as either architecturally or historically significant to the city and to the area. There are also other kinds of districts, such as local historic districts. We have one of those in Marlborough, the Monument Square District. That's a district where there's a board within the city that regulates modifications to those buildings, where there are actually preservation restrictions on those buildings. National Register properties don't have any sorts of restrictions like that, although if there are commercial properties within the district, they are eligible for some tax credits for restoring their properties.
So Monument Square includes?
7 buildings, actually, and a couple monuments, including Monument Square, the First Baptist Church. We've been doing a lot of work at the old post office and the Lincoln Inn up at the corner of Mechanic Street.
Now you had mentioned the historic survey that was done by the Marlborough Historic Commission.
Right. Back in the early 90s, we hired a consultant to help us survey the historic properties in Marlborough. We actually did surveys of over 1,000 buildings and monuments throughout the city that are historically significant. There's all of the information from that survey is available at the library. People can look at it there. They can look up their buildings and see if they are a property that was surveyed during that period. It's really a first step for any city or town to do preservation work under state and federal programs. And we've actually, since we've done that, have been able to do the National Register work and apply for certain grants that we wouldn't have been able to otherwise.
That was certainly a welcome project. So many people come into the library who have maybe just bought a house, or they're interested now in their old house, and they just go through these, and it's really a collection from many different sources of historical information so that they can have a good history. I wanted to mention, too, another very worthwhile project that I know you worked on, Lynn, as part of the Marlborough Historic Society, was the index to Ella Bigelow's Historical Reminiscences of Marlborough, Massachusetts, up to 1920. This is such a rambling, run-on sentences are rampant throughout this book, and to have a really well-done, concise index has been a godsend. And I believe there are still hard copies available from the Marlborough Historical Society for sale. So if anyone owns an Ella Bigelow's history, it really is so useful. I think those two resources, the Historic Commission survey of Marlborough properties and the index to Ella Bigelow's history, were probably the most used resources. Frank, you have been very active in the Historical Society, and would you like to let us know what the Society is doing? It's a group of volunteers.
First of all, I want to thank you for allowing me the time, Susan. This is really a pleasure. Now, on behalf, and I speak on behalf of the Marlborough Historical Society, I would like to just read a few excerpts from something that was used, I believe, on Soul House, and I think it was last June. And these are some information which I think is pertinent to the Society. I will preface all of this by saying that my interest in the Society stems from, I suppose, my heritage, and being of Latin heritage. That's probably some of it, that Roman blood in me. Well, actually, we are all parts of the past. We are, we represent, we are what we are today because of the past. But just to go in a little as far as the Marlborough Historical Society, in keeping with its bylaws to collect, study, preserve, and maintain historical records, relics, and objects relating to the history of Marlborough, its founders and peoples, presents in the Peter Rice House an ongoing and abiding testimonial to its dedication and objectives. The Society's far-sighted acquisition, continuing refurbishment, and preservation of this famed heirloom of Marlborough's past, present vivid testimony and demonstration of its commitments and objectives. Over the years, the Peter Rice homestead has had many and varied usage. In the 1920s and 30s, it was still a working farm, then known as Fitch Farm. After its acquisition by the LaBelle family, well-known dairy farmers, the property was divided into 4 apartments to help meet the housing shortage of World War II. In the 1960s, the Honeywell Corporation purchased the property with plans to raise the old homestead. That is when the Marlborough Historical Society, then in its infancy, raised objections rather loud and clear. So much so that the Corporation, in a gesture of goodwill, deeded to the Society use of the Peter Rice House and that portion of land in its immediate surroundings in exchange for a token annual rental. Despite several changes of ownership over the years in the original Honeywell holdings, this 1967 rental agreement remains in effect, and the Society continues to be custodians of this historic place. Since that time, the Marlborough Historical Society continues to maintain and improve the homestead, oversees of a museum of extensive Marlborough memorabilia, holds its meetings and social events on the premises, all open to the public, and maintains its headquarters there. Now, if you have any questions with regard to that, Susan, I will try to do my best to answer them.
Well, the Society is certainly lucky to have a very old farmhouse as its headquarters, because so many other societies either don't have any place to meet, or if they do, it's not, a very,
and
the ambiance is not historical.
I might mention that it is rather old. We, of course, on our sign, it says 1688. To the best of our knowledge, that's when either it was started to be built at that time. That is what the records say, you know. We won't dispute any arguments to the contrary, that the fact remains that it does go into the 1600s.
Well, the Historical Society has been very fortunate to have a new curator who has an old house himself and really wanted to see the Rice homestead repainted. So, Richard Wilcox, maybe you'd like to talk a little bit about what got you going on getting the homestead painted, making it, you know, another jewel of the city.
We've done a lot. We have painted most recently, and before I talk about that, though, I want to go back to what Frank was saying about the Historical Society over the years having many and varied uses, and I would say that even still today, that's true. We function out of the Society, we hold our meetings there, and that's where our archives are. The Society serves so many different purposes, in my view. We have socials, we have muffin mornings. Once a month or so we have a social that's open to members and non-members alike, and that's a lot of fun. We have tours. Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts have, over the years, as far as I know, for many years, toured through the Society House as part of their historic portion of their getting badges and things. Then we have the archives that also, within themselves, they serve many purposes. We have people coming. We do have the index, a copy of the index also, and we have people coming to look for records on the house they just purchased, perhaps, or one that they have been in for some years and always meant to come look up. Then we have different things. Our archives are really pretty extraordinary. I think people, unfortunately, it's impossible to show everything all the time, and people, I don't think a lot of people know, even people who come regularly to meetings and to events, know how vast our collection is. What I've tried to do in the last 3 or 4 years that I've been there is show it, and at least once a year we completely change all the displays to try to show, you know, at least a portion of what we have. Some of the things we have are maybe too delicate to put out, or you know, they're too large to put in the cases we have, or what have you. But over the years, my goal has been, and it will continue to be, to try to show as much of what we have to the public and to our members that we can. Now, getting back to the painting, that's kind of another facet of the Society in and of itself. We try to, or I've tried to, make historic preservation something the Society, I wouldn't say preaches, but something the Society educates people on through example. And what we did was we, to the best of our ability and to the best of our financial means, we restored the exterior of the Society as closely as we could to, you know, to be, you know, I never would have had any siding or anything like that put up, and we tried to use the right paints and not make it a color, although that's something else that people are sometimes confused about. Colors were varied even back in the 1600s. But we've tried to do the right things in showing what we have, in bringing groups in and talking to them, and in working on the house. In the painting process, we uncovered a lot of sill damage, a lot of you know, insect damage and water damage and things like this, and we tried to address those correctly while disturbing as little as possible.
And the community really rallied forth
Yeah.
with donations.
The community was great.
People who drive by on Elm Street said, yes, I want to see this beautiful farmhouse. It's really reminiscent of what used to always be in Marlborough. You know, a lot of farmland. It was a very agricultural town. And
Sure.
it was really, you know, nice to see banks and individuals and people just say, yes, here, you know, here's another can of paint, because it really made a difference.
We did. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that should not go without being said, that it wouldn't have really been possible without the community. We raised, in the neighborhood of $10,000 for this project, and really it was amazing. It was nice to see, and it wasn't. I don't think it was. It was largely members, but there were, as you say, banks that got involved. I believe we even got some donations from people who are not official members, and that's fantastic. That was wonderful. That's really one of the things it's all about, and what the Historical Society is all about. A lot of people think think of us as this old house that has all these old things that belong to us, and really it's not about that. The house is the communities, and the things in it are the communities, and we wouldn't have anything in our collection if it wasn't for the community, because virtually everything we have, as Frank says, it was an acquisition from somebody in or around Marlborough, whether they were a member or not.
A donation,
Yeah.
right? The society did not purchase
Right, no,
any of these
no, we
items.
don't purchase
No.
anything. So that's been great.
And nobody is paid on the staff.
No.
There's no paid staff. It's all volunteers who
Yeah.
have whatever interest it might be, whether it's cataloging or hosting a muffin morning or organizing interesting programs, speakers to come.
Sure.
I think that's true of all of our preservation and historical groups. We have 4 or 5 preservation-oriented groups. I think that the Historic Society building and the painting project is a great example of how the community really rallies around preservation. I remember right in the mid-90s when the First Baptist Church had the courage of changing that once white building to its multicolor Queen Anne facade. The community really rallied around that. They did donate, whether they were church members or not, and they did a fabulous job, and it really added a lot of pride and a lot of character to the community. I think that one of the things that I've noticed in doing preservation work is that property owners really want to do the right thing. They want to do the right colors. They don't want to mess up their houses, and they want information. One of the organizations that Richard and I are also on is the Old House Association, which is geared totally at educating homeowners who want to do the right thing with their homes. And we've had a number of activities to help them educate. One of our most successful activities a couple years ago was one where we had a paint clinic where we helped people that had different types of houses learn what the appropriate color schemes might be for their house. We meet once a month in a homeowner's house, and we tour the house from attic to basement and talk about how the house was preserved, if it already is preserved, and if it's in a state of some sort of state of restoration or preservation. The group gets together and helps that person figure out how to do it, either do it themselves or what kind of contractors they would need and who the good contractors are that might be capable of doing that sort of work. So, I mean, I think there are, between the Historic Society, the Historic Commission, the Old House Association, the things at the library even, there's just so much information for homeowners who want to do the right thing and do preservation.
Well, maybe now would be a good time to just mention a couple of phone numbers. If people are listening at home and they say want to call up the library and find out if we have city directories, high school yearbooks, vocational yearbooks, the index, as we mentioned, to Ella Bigelow's history. We also have Hudson's history and numerous other things. It's 508-624-6900. And our catalog is also available on the web, http://www.marlborough, the long way, OUGH.com.mpl.html. And it's library information as well as the catalog. If people are interested to find out more about the Old House Association, 508-481-8630. Jean Douglas is the president, and she has also been very active in the Historical Society too. She's a member of, is she a member of the Historic Commission?
She's a former member.
Former member. Okay. And then if people would like to get in touch with the Historic Commission, which is the city-based organization that Lynn Faust is co-chair of. The number is 508-460-0798. And then for Historical Society questions for the curator, Richard Wilcox, 508-460-3499. Or you can also write. A lot of people have inquiries. They'll write either to the library or the Historical Society because they're from out of state and they know they're going to be traveling to Massachusetts. And if they notify people ahead of time, at least there's some time to look. And it's P.O. Box 513, and it's located at 377 Elm Street in Marlborough, Massachusetts, 01752. What else are we?
Well, Lynn mentioned, I just wanted to say that Lynn mentioned the library's part in all this, and I think the library is invaluable. I mean, almost inevitably, if somebody's in our archives looking for some records or some information on a house or on a family member or something from the past, if we don't have it, that's my first recommendation as a librarian. I can't remember a time when between the society and the library they didn't get information they were looking for. So that's another, I consider the library another branch of these historic groups, and the library has many other purposes and meanings, but I think they do a good job in helping, and I always recommend they come see you.
Great, thanks.
Well,
Young adult librarian.
I think we all spent a lot of time down there looking at microfiche of the old Marlborough Enterprises, the records, the birth and death records, lots of things that are down there that are primary resources for the survey work. It's just, I don't know how many hours I've spent there at the machine going through it, but it's very interesting reading, and it's the sort of thing that once you know a little bit about the history, you may have gone through the newspapers once and not noticed something, but something, the second reading might really click something, and it's just great, the facility there.
Yeah, no index for the Marlborough Enterprise, which is a little unfortunate. Some small newspapers were able to obtain a grant probably about 15 or 20 years ago where they index these small local newspapers. But that would be very welcome if anyone that wanted a really long project to work on. But some of the microfilmed items are these handwritten documents where the paper is just, so fragile that it's really saving a lot of damage when this can be microfilmed. So I was going to mention too that we're just about to hang, I should be up today, the Cotton Mather letter. Now Cotton Mather was a real leader in politics and religion in the 1600s. He was even involved in the Salem witch trials later on. But Marlborough is kind of unique in that it had this early split in its church. You couldn't really have a town unless you had a church. So he was giving some advice on whether or not, we should move into the east and the west side with the meeting houses. He also said, don't call them churches, call them meeting houses. So we just had that in the library forever, and it really hadn't been put in a acid-free mat so that it doesn't deteriorate further. So now we have protective glass on it, and it will be available for viewing. We also have a new addition in the periodicals room, a 1920 photo mural of Main Street, Marlborough, and it's taken right in front of Florence Street and Main Street with the type of camera that turns all the way around 360 degrees when it takes the photograph. So I guess if you were a fast runner, you could run from City Hall all the way down towards Monument Square, and you'd be in the photograph twice. But yeah, it's quite a marvel. So it's nice to have a big space for that because, like Richard says, we have all these wonderful treasures. And
yeah, one of the problems we have here in Marlborough, though, is that we do not have enough display space for all the good things we do have. We need more museum space in the city of Marlborough.
Absolutely.
Between the photo collections, the artifacts that we have,
shoes,
clothing, shoes,
industrial machinery, farm tools.
Yeah, very often when someone's doing research, I'll say, well, yeah, there's a photo of that. Go to the third floor in City Hall and ask Grace Lyons if you can see the photo that's in back of her. And that's just not a great way to do research, to go flying around the city trying to find photos here and there. We really need display space that is large enough to display our photo collection, our collection of maps. We have some fabulous maps that we do research on in the city of Marlborough from the 1800s. From this particular map is what's called a bird's eye view of the city of Marlborough. It actually shows in 1878 the outlines in each and every building in the city of Marlborough at that time, as though someone photographed it from the air, realizing that no one could possibly have done that because people didn't fly in airplanes then. But it's a great research tool. There's 1835 maps. We have 1803 maps. We have some very nice early maps that people use to research their houses.
And these also are available at the Marlborough Public Library, and again, very fragile. It's a wealth of information that, you know, just makes it interesting to know where you're living. And I try and instill a love of community with our young people by taking them on historical tours of Marlborough through the different schools. And when people know that something important happened down the street, or they know about the house across from them, it really does make them want to live here in Marlborough. Wouldn't you agree, Frank? You've been here probably longer than any of us.
A few more moons. But getting back to what Lynn said, as far as the museum is concerned, we're getting to be a fairly large community, and it would be a wonderful thing if at some point in time someone would donate either the space or the building which would allow us to do that. That's something that I think I've talked about, you've talked about it, many of us have talked about it. And why should people be interested in antiquity? Antiquity is their past. It's our past. And if we want to pass any of this on to future generations, it's got to be there so that they can research it, so they can see it firsthand and so forth. So if it's a building, if it's a vase, if it's a photo, or whatever it might be. And in that regard, I might mention, while I'm about to here, at our next meeting, which is going to be Tuesday, June 26th at 7:30, there's going to be a What's It by Barbara Barker, who will be the speaker for the evening.
This will probably be aired after this is over. This is the final program for the whole year, starting in September, Barbara Somerville will have a whole variety of speakers, and that's something to keep in mind too. If you have a special interest, say you collect something or you know how to fix an old barn, I mean, maybe you'd like to share that information with other people who are very interested.
Tell us all about it. We'd love to have you do it. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's definitely a trend in not only Marlborough, but throughout the world, I think. People really are trying to find links to the past. It's a connectiveness, I guess, that they want. It's a sense of space. So any other final, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Yes.
Lynn?
We'll have to talk some more because it's such a wealth of knowledge, mountain of knowledge. Okay. So we're here, historically speaking, Susan Alatalo, and thank you for listening to us talk a little bit about our wonderful local history community.